Hey, so something that I saw last night that I really wanted to share, and that's because, as you can see, sitting by the fire or the fire pit, because I can't really build a fire, and I'm in a place like, California is probably not the best place to start a fire, if you know what I mean. Lots of wildfires here. So I saw something last night that really made me think. Um, Someone that I watch on YouTube, and I'm really, really inspired by his channel because he's one of those people that gave up everything and moved to Tanzania. And he dedicated his entire life to helping children, disabled children, and poor people. And he had the call of the spirit. I don't know how it happens, but I do know I felt that way about animals. And it's something that I will be doing before the year is out and into next year is dedicating larger portions of my life I've been educating people about wildlife. I host a show on ABC for those of you who are new to my channel on Saturday mornings. It's called The Wildlife Docs, and it's a show about veterinarians and animals, over 10,000 animals, and what happens. Like otter gets a root canal, giraffe has a baby, stuff like that. But in the meantime, that's pretty interesting. But you get to learn a lot about animals, some that you've never seen before, and I've always been fascinated by animals, had my own show on Animal Planet where I travel the world and compared animal and human behavior. And so it's been a passion of mine, especially in the past 40 years. We've lost half the animals not half the animals, half the wildlife on the planet. Like in 40 years, and I'm over 40. So in my lifetime, we've lost half the wildlife on the planet. And I don't really care about being on TV anymore, but I want to use my platform that I have built over the past 15 years to bring people to Costa Rica and places like the wildlife so that they get an experience with animals. Because when you have an experience, your life changes. It's more than talking about it or looking it up or reading about it. And that changed my life. I volunteered in Costa Rica and in Thailand, and I just want to share that experience and guide trips to Costa Rica. So that's on a side note. But this guy, he walks his talk. I think he says he's a Christian. More wants to live what he knows as Jesus did. The reason that I'm showing you what he has to say is that I'm fascinated by a post that he did, which seems off the cuff, but his knowledge, and I should say wisdom more than knowledge, because you know how somebody can be smart about something because they're well read or they memorized information that someone else gave them, which is really kind of what education and knowledge is, especially in America, is just regurgitating a system that is already programmed to feed us what they want us to know about history, which history is really just his story. And not necessarily the truth, but a certain perspective of the truth. But many books are like that. And so when I say knowledge, he's more than knowledgeable. He's wise and deep. And I just want to share what he has to say about archons, because I've never spent too much time thinking about archons and what that means. But the way he talks about this opened my mind to it. I grew up Christian. I grew up a lot of the stories in the Bible. Never understood the jealous God, never understood the God of the Old Testament. It just didn't make sense. And this world still doesn't make sense. The evil, the pain we inflict on others on purpose, the way we're destroying the planet. It doesn't make sense to me how a God of perfection and love would allow it or even create a world that has so much pain. And it has beauty as well, but I could never explain as this man does. And because he's kind of the guy that walks the talk, I also wanted to I'm going to post links to his channel, but I also wanted to show you guys who he is in case you didn't know about him. And if anybody feels inspired to give to him or help his mission or just inspired by what he has to say, then good. Then I'm spreading more light. And I think he's a huge beacon of light. And so I'm just going to share what he says. Okay, I'm going to go to his channel right now so you can kind of see who I'm talking about. When he speaks, you kind of feel that energy of love in his eyes. And I just, if you feel it, you feel it. If you don't, just can't explain it. You got to see it. Okay, so this is who he is. His name is John St. Julian Baba Wanyama. Yeah, I'm not even going to try to explain that. That's his name. Let me share his channel a second with you guys. Okay, share. Here we go. Make sure we turn on his sound so you can hear him. Yeah, make him small. I mean, me small and him big. Okay, this is him. A life in service to Mother, Father, Creator. Welcome to the channel. So this is him. He says, when he gave up myself, I found who I am. In 2013, he followed a sign from Spirit to East Africa, Tanzania. Since then, with the support of Mother, Father, Creator and those who watch this channel and the Facebook, literally off of that, and this is where social media can be a positive thing in the world. Just through those two channels, they built a village where children in crisis live. They're being taken care of. Over 100 children are now in our guardianship. In fact, over half of which have special needs or disabilities. We also opened an animal rescue with over 70 residents and liberated over 1,000 children from desperate poverty and provided them with access to education and medical care. Many of those children were involved in child labor beforehand. Along with that journey, after several prolonged water-only fasts, somehow my state of consciousness and awareness shifted, and I began to see spiritual signs and codes in religious texts across the planet and in every faith. I also share that which I see and those spiritual lessons which I learn, living a life totally dependent on prayer and God. A life of service is something more than the self. Out beyond our thoughts of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. Which he doesn't state this, but that's a quote from Rumi. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's kind of what should be in the political spectrum right now. If everyone could just get out of their attachment to the right or wrong and the left and the right and realize it's all one bird, right? The left wing and the right wing belong to one bird, one planet. Here we go. You guys can play this later, but this is who he is. And in a second, I'm going to play you what kind of moved me last night and opened my eyes in a big way.
Child labor.
This is him.
My name's John and I live here in East Africa, Tanzania. That is Mount Kilimanjaro. I use this channel to support thousands of children who struggle in poverty, child labor, and many abandoned or homeless. On this channel you follow my journey in service to Mother, Father, Creator. After I was called here during my spiritual awakening back in 2011.
11.
After I was called, I decided to give everything up and move here because I was so certain that Spirit had called me. In 2013, I moved here. And by 2014, I was flat broke. My wife jokes when she met me there was no glass in the windows of my house and no curtains hanging up and holes in my shoes. In 2014, I opened a Facebook page. I then opened a YouTube channel, as you well know. By the end of 2014, I became a guardian to some of the children here. Now, in 2018, we have built a village called Feathers Tail Children's Village, which is where I live. We have become, as in the charity, the NGO, and myself and my wife have become the guardian to over 100 children, over half of which have disabilities or special needs.
So I'm going to post his link if you want to learn more about him. He's just, when I saw this, I was like, okay, this is someone that's like walking the talk and very inspirational. And when you hear him speak, you can just kind of understand that because he's living it. He's living it. He's living a lot of hardships too, and he sees a lot. But following him is so inspirational, watching his journey. And I know that a lot of people on my channel, we all love to watch conspiracy, fear-based stuff. And I get caught in that trap too. And I was about, and probably will still be doing a video about 5G. I don't want to focus on the fear of it. I want to focus on the reality of it unfolding and happening and what we can do about it, because it's so frustrating watching something when someone's like, well, what do we do? What do we do about it? So I'm still researching before I post anything about 5G, because as of yesterday, Verizon rolled it out in 5 different cities, and LA is one of them. So if my brain's not fried by the time I figure out some options, the reason I said that is I don't want to focus on fear. I really want to focus on love, and I also want to focus on the people that are light in the world and what they have to say, because I definitely have a lot to say, but I also know that I know nothing, and there are people like this person that have far more wisdom than I ever could, and so much courage to do something like this, that I am in awe, literally in awe of this person and what he's done. So he was speaking just randomly. I just was looking at some of his videos. I hadn't tuned in a while. About someone asked him about the ARCHON and what God created our reality, and it's a very interesting question, because I've really wondered how we can live in a world with so much pain, and yet it was created supposedly by a God of love, which I believe God is. So it's a very confusing dichotomy of thoughts going on all the time for a lot of people, especially now, I'm sure. So I'm just going to play what he has to say and then end the video, because I couldn't say it better. And if it makes you think, great. Don't be offended. If it does not fit with your belief system, if it's not in alignment, just allow yourself to, I don't know, be challenged, and also be open by what he has to say, because I feel like he's experienced a lot more than books could ever teach. So here we go.
And the community is Oromit. I brought our... Hey guys, I am out at the Maasai, and the community is Oromit. I brought our volunteers here so they could be greeted by the tribe, and they've met a lot of the tribe anyway with the amount of warriors who work at Share Tanzania, but just to get the cultural understanding, that's why we've brought them along. So they've gone off for a walk in the bush, and as you know, I can't walk very far, so I thought I'd sit it out.
He's going through some health issues.
Chill out with some of the Morans. But I've excused myself and perched my camera on top of my walking stick so I hope it doesn't fall off, because I felt like making a video. And I felt like making this video for a little while, and I haven't gotten around to doing it. So I thought, why not now while I've got some time to kill? My Kimasai is not the best, so communication's not great here. Swahili, not so bad. Masai, terrible. So it's its own language. I want to talk about the Archon and the Demiurge. Many people ask about it, and I don't want to talk about the theological discussion. I don't want to talk about the written ideas of other people. I just want to talk about the concept, where it's born from, and the philosophy behind it, and what it's all about exactly. And in recent years, I know it's been made famous by David Icke, because he starts speaking about Archon, this demigod that created our reality, and uses it as like an energy extraction matrix, is how he described it. But the term Archon comes from the Nag Hammadi, and the Nag Hammadi is part of the collection of ancient Christian texts, which are also known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in there is a story of creation, whereby the creator of this reality, the Archon, is a demiurge, it's a lesser god. And what happened was the Sophia, the divine feminine, decided to birth a child without involving a male, and in doing so created the Archon. And the Archon had problems and was amnesic and didn't realize that they were not the original god, so they thought they were the original god. And they say it's a very powerful creative force, but not the original source of creation. So the Archon created this reality, and forgot that it was not the original God. But what it also says is that the Archon took its mother, the Sophia, and trapped it in matter to use that energy. So it says the fragmentation of that energy is us. We are the Sophia trapped in matter. Now, a lot of people say that it's blasphemous to entertain the idea that the creator of this world is not the original God, but I would like to point out that the Bible wholeheartedly stands against that opinion in a big, big way, and Jesus as well. So it's open for discussion and should be discussed because it's important and it helps to start understanding our reality, which is sometimes tricky to understand. So there is, of course, similar roots in what's been said there with Luciferianism, whereas Luciferians believed that Adam and Eve were trapped in matter, and the serpent that came was actually an angel from the original source of creation and tried to liberate them. And they show this, they say, you know, that God told them, if you eat of that fruit if you eat of the fruit of the tree, then you're going to die. But they didn't die. But what if they didn't literally die? What if they died in an energetic way? And by that I mean, if you look around and you see the animals of this world, like your dog at home, they seem, because they don't have the carnal mind, they just seem so much more vibrant and full of energy. And the same with my son at the moment. He hasn't yet developed his intellect and his ego, and thus he's very vibrant and full of love and energy at the moment. So maybe it's a different type of death that we suffer. Now, I've spoke about this before, and of course the story of Adam and Eve is an allegory. And for me, that's not open for discussion. Snakes don't talk. There's no scientific evidence that humanity stemmed from two persons somewhere located in the world. But what there is plenty of evidence for is the fact that when you split an electron from an atom, or you take Eve from Adam, the rib, to create Eve, then you start the multiplication of all life. And it's an allegory for the splitting of the atom. It's very clear, and you see it, especially if you read the other Adam and Eve texts, which I've covered in brief when I spoke about the lions in Christianity, the texts that are left out of the Bible. You really see the allegory behind it all and why it's there, because it's important, because that is the origin of life. The origin of life is not a man and woman, because the origin of man and woman is the splitting of an atom. So the origin of life is way before them, and that's what the splitting of Adam and Eve is, or atom and electron. So for me it's not literal, but the serpent is the introduction of choice, and I've said this before, that when you have the introduction of choice, you can choose to do good or you can choose to do bad. You can go one way or the other. And that's ultimately what the serpent is, and every day the serpent always tries to tempt you, all the time. But how does that reflect upon the story of our creation? Well, when I look out in nature, I really struggle with the idea that there is a loving, controlling force behind it all. So I always came to the conclusion there were natural forces that were put in place, laws, to allow for this expression of life to be what it is. And as you begin to understand the polarity of things and this temptation of humans to feel that one side is going to win, and that creates this anxiety in us that evil might beat good and good might beat evil and dark might win over light and light might win over dark. It's nonsense, because they're opposites, so one can't exist without the other. But the anxiety we feel that one might win over the other is part of the human illusion and part of the game we play, but a necessary one. You know, that this is the expression of this reality, this is how it works. So then you take a look at how the world around us works. Now, in the natural world, and I see young newborn animals getting torn apart here, or I see baby antelopes caught by a baboon and eaten piece by piece with their fingers without killing them from the back up, from the anus up. It's just brutal, harsh, disgusting, violent, and horrible. And yes, we might, if we had no knowledge of good and evil, we might accept that it's normal, but I'm happy I have a knowledge of good and evil, so I'm not a monkey in the woods who's tearing an animal apart and not comprehending the suffering and pain that I'm doing to it, which is what happens with a baboon. They don't have the empathy for the pain that something else is going through. We do. Now, some animals do find empathy. We see this, hunters, sometimes leopards will adopt baby animals from the ones they kill and so on, lions too here. So there is compassion in other beings, but humans have a better ability to express that. But when you look at that, you have to say that either God set about natural laws, and some of these laws are pretty messed up, and that's why such suffering exists, or he's just far too passive with regards to free will because it's a necessity, otherwise what's the point, and we'd just be robots, and thus allows for that darkness to come through. Or you can look at what Jesus said, and Jesus said that the God of this world, Jesus said his Father's kingdom is not of this world, so God's kingdom's not of this world. So it also says that Satan is the prince of this world. So if Satan's the prince of this world and God is not the God of this world, then what's going on there? And then you can lean towards this Archon concept, and the idea would go that the Archon created this reality, and because God is passive when it comes to free will and loves all his children indiscriminately and independently and without judgment, then it comes to the point where he has to allow that to happen. You know, God allows us to be monstrosities on this planet. Look at what we're doing to the planet and the suffering we cause and the ignorance we live in. He allows it. Same as he'll allow for something energetically more powerful than us to live in ignorance if it's his child. So this Archon created this reality according to this concept. And God is slowly trying to make it palatable. Like reality is a soup, and you're throwing in ingredients to make it palatable, and those ingredients are messengers such as Jesus and the Buddha and all of those persons who have altered human consciousness and planted the concept inside human minds of spiritual pursuit and the pursuit of God over the pursuit of money and war and so on and so forth. Remember, these are concepts. You could easily live in a human society with zero spiritual concept, and I can't imagine a society like that would be very pleasant, but I'm sure they have been around because they are concept born out of human thinking. And I find when I'm with more indigenous tribes who are focused on survival, then the concept of spirituality hasn't really entered into them fully, like it would do in the West when you're much more comfortable with your high walls, etc., to protect you from the environment around you. So when you look at all of that together, it can fit. You know, no one has the answer, because what you have to remember at the end of all of this, people will espouse, oh, I know this, and this is how it is, this is how it is, and they're just completely unenlightened beings, because they're speaking concepts, and concept to concepts, and ultimately all we've got, as I've said, is here. That's it. That's all you've got. That's your reality. That's the only reality you're ever going to have. So when people really fight and stand by something and say, this is how it is, I know this is how it is, then they've either had a direct experience out of body, or they are just repeating what they've read and it makes sense to them, so they're hanging on and saying it's so. I can't say one way or the other if this was created by an Archon or by the original God. I see the beauty in creation here, which is the original source's presence in all creative forces around, including ourselves and animals and the plant life, etc. But perhaps even including an Archon or a Demiurge that created this reality. Who would know? But what it does do, it solves many problems about how this loving God, who wants me to end suffering, somehow created a reality with immeasurable suffering, but then wants other people to end suffering. It doesn't make sense. But then that's where the Archon thing fits, because then it does start to make sense. Because the loving God that I know, I don't see that God as needing all of this bloodlust and this bloodthirstiness. And this is the unusual thing of the Bible, is this Old Testament God who's bloodthirsty and a monster. He's an absolute monstrosity, the God of the Old Testament, and no one can say he's not. Just constantly demanding blood sacrifices and all of this. And you could even say the God of the New Testament is a bit shady, because for some reason the only way he could dream up of forgiving humanity for his sins was to torture his own son. It really doesn't make sense, does it? Because there has to be more deeper meaning to it, because otherwise why torture him? Why do that? Why put him through that for the sake of finding the ability within you to forgive? I can forgive people without needing to torture and hurt people. And that's because it's trying to show an expression of love. You mean so much that I would do this for your love for me and to save you, to protect you. But when you really look deep at it, then there really some problems do start to arise, because it also states in the Bible, where God clearly states, it's like there's a changing God. I delight not in blood sacrifices, he says. So who was asking for them? And these are the conflicts we see of this book. But if you just sit back and take the book away, which is the Nag Hammadis, where the concept comes from, then even just accept it as a concept without your ego coming in. with a sober mind, without the information you've read coming in, and evaluate it from the present moment, from here, which is all you've got, then you can easily sit philosophically on one side or the other. You can say a demigod could have created it without a shadow of a doubt, or could not have. But the important thing about all of it is, and very important, is that they are concepts. And if you're going to side with one side of a concept or the other, that's up to you. But they are still concepts, and you will never know until you have a direct experience, because truth is here, here, here. That's the only truth you've got. And thus, the understanding of here as the present moment can allow you to dip further into your energy and thus pass beyond the concept of physical matter. But if this physical matter is created by a demiurge or an archon, then perhaps there are snares in there to stop you from seeing outside of the veil, and God will be well aware of them, because as we know from Jesus, he came not of this world. He came from not of this world, and all of the spiritual teachers speak of the same way, that this kingdom, the more physical aspect of it, is not of their world, not the kingdom of the Father or the Mother Father Creator. So it's an unusual concept. It's a very unusual concept, and there's also the idea that within there the Archon is also starting to enlighten itself and realize the error in its way of creation, etc. So either side of the fence you can go to, really, if you have an open mind and you are sober-minded. Many people will say, oh, this is heretical because you've said this, but those are people who I can't have theological discussions with because they're not emotionally mature enough to have them. And it's not worth engaging in conversations with people like that, because they're just going to throw their emotions at you. But you can't say for certain, just because you've read a certain book and everyone says that book's the way it is. You can't say it for certain. But if you go and sit in the bush for as long as you can, like I do, then you can start dwelling on these things and say, yeah, that's a viable solution. That's a viable solution. But at the end of the day, I don't have time to keep evaluating viable solutions, because I'm too busy expressing the song that God has placed in my heart. And that is, I'm able to express that because I don't side with the concepts, and I'm aware that they are concepts. So, did an Archon create this reality? Potentially. Did an Archon not create this reality? Potentially. But you can't explain away a loving God with the things I see in nature. It's not loving, it's not peaceful. So, if we're going to say that God's the Prince of Peace, then he either created it with laws that are needed to be abided by to have that expression of what we experience as life, the polarity of things, or indeed a lesser God created an imperfect world, and the Mother Father, original source of creation, is trying to coerce its child and also this soup of reality into something more palatable for those who experience it. So, Demiurge and the Archon. Love you all. Bye.
Okay. Oh my gosh. So you see what I mean? Let me stop sharing a second so I can talk to you guys about this. I just I think he's incredible. I think that was a big chunk of information that I thought about for a long time last night. And I hope that it speaks to some of you, because it's not just a man spouting on YouTube. Someone that's in the trenches, helping people survive, making that corner of the planet a better place, which is what we all need to be doing.